call this meeting of the City of West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission meeting, Thursday, February 27th, 2020, to order. If you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Present.
Commissioner Kirby?
Present.
Commissioner Maggio? Here. Commissioner Martz? Absent. Commissioner Charity?
Here.
Vice Chair Topchian?
Here.
Chair Bergstein?
Present. We have a quorum. Going into item 4, approve the agenda. We all had a chance to review tonight's agenda. If you have any changes or corrections, if not, entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirby?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz is absent. Commissioner Charity?
Yes.
Vice Chair Topchian?
Aye.
Chair Bergstein?
Aye. Motion passes. Going on to item 6, public comments. I don't have any general public comment slips at this time. Going on to item 7, manager report. Mr. Noonan. Oh, sorry. We're not voting the minutes? Beg pardon. Going back to item 5, approval of the minutes from the February 13th, 2019 meeting. Are there any changes or corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Can you have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirby?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz is absent. Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchian?
Aye.
Chair Bergstein?
Aye. Passes. Thank you for catching that. Now we'll go to item 7, manager's report.
Good evening. I'd like to review the look-ahead calendar for you. This evening, we do have one appeal and one discussion item, which is the proposed right to counsel that Legal Services is bringing forward. On March 12th, we don't have any appeals scheduled at this time. However, we do have two discussion items, one of which is a commissioner-led item on broken elevators. I will be reaching out to the commissioners who I believe had asked for that item to see what their thoughts are. I believe it was Commissioner O'Keefe that had been one of those commissioners that had wanted this discussion, so I'll reach out to see how that should be structured. And then information on the deposit interest formula, which was a request from, I believe, Commissioner Kirby and maybe some others to look at how the formula is calculated, what banks are used, and if we do, in fact, need to continue to use brick and mortar banks that are located in West Hollywood, or if we could use online banks or other sources to calculate the deposit interest. On March 26th and April 9th, we will be meeting at Fiesta Hall in Plummer Park while the council chambers are closed, and so please make a note of that. This will be 2 East Side meetings. They will be televised, and we're looking at some discussion items for those 2 meetings, one of which may be a discussion item on the new state rent law, AB 1482. Speaking of the new state law, I wanted to direct your attention to some of the items in your packet, your mail packet, one of which is a flyer that we've developed. This is a postcard that provides information for the public on what rent programs apply to what type of housing units that you're renting. So this is primarily designed for property owners, but can certainly be used by tenants as well to really understand and navigate what laws are in place and apply to your unit based on the age that it was built, how many units are on the property, whether it's an accessory dwelling unit or not, if that accessory dwelling unit was built in an existing structure. These are only a couple of the examples of different forms of development that the laws would apply to a little bit differently. We also have this information on our website at www.weho.org/rent. We have a postcard that went out to all of the RSO property owners reminding that we have an online registration process and system. It's very easy, allows for registrations to be done anywhere on a mobile device, even Palm Pilot, you name it. But this saves the effort of coming into City Hall and dropping off your registration form at the counter. You can now register your new tenants from the comfort of your home.
And then on the flip side of that, if you want to just show that, just to remind me about the census.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So we do have all of our information. Well, the information on this does remind folks about our census and that we're please be counted for the new 2020 census. We do also have in your packets both the landlord and the tenant newsletters that went out just recently. So if you didn't receive a copy of either of those, you have copies of both, so you'll see all the information that the public is receiving from us. Lastly, we also are providing a little information as a public health announcement. We have some information on the coronavirus, and this is at City Hall, and we're providing this. This is from the LA County Department of Public Health, so that we're getting the message out to the community about what the coronavirus is, how is it spread, and the symptoms, and how you can protect yourself. So that's my report.
Any questions for Mr. Newton?
On the renting house piece here, it shows an area of property type include illegal and unpermitted dwellings. Do we still have those? I thought maybe we
Every so often we do. Every so often we do have an illegal or an unpermitted resident dwelling unit. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can put it into context. Oftentimes, this is where a property owner has converted a garage into a living space. It may not have been done through permits, something of that nature.
I have two questions, and this is all great information, by the way. Thank you for the team for putting it together. First, do we have any update on the priorities of the commission? Did the city council take them up so that we might consider them?
I apologize. No, they haven't, but we will get them to their meeting, the next meeting available.
Okay, and the next one, thanks for the information on coronavirus. We have no idea, of course, how severe it might spread here, but in some countries, they're taking pretty severe measures to limit people's exposure to each other. The CDC talked about the potential of teleschools so that people wouldn't physically go to schools anymore. I know in Italy, they've shut down all schools. So I'm wondering if the city is considering or has already considered options to make things more remote, like a possibility of in-person hearings for the hearing examiner, maybe even commission meetings or city council members meetings in case we end up with a kind of spread that we're seeing in some other countries.
So, at City Hall, we're monitoring the public health response continuously, and there is designated city staff that are participating regularly in updates from the LA County Department of Public Health. And the city will follow the lead set by Los Angeles County Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and on protocols for public spaces and messaging out into the community. We are taking it seriously, and we are looking at developing contingency plans and just watching and paying attention and being a part of the process.
Okay, thanks. I guess specifically we came across that we couldn't meet in any other location other than Fiesta Hall, and I was wondering if that's the same as City Council, and it just might be a good idea for general preparedness to have a plan of if there's ever any kind of pandemic where we can't physically have people get together so that government can continue without having to deal with that on the fly as well.
I did raise that question with the executive team at the city, and so the city is looking into that.
I lived in New Orleans before Katrina, and there were a lot of things that I assumed that there were plans for because we knew we were in a hurricane-prone area, and there weren't, so glad to hear it. Thanks.
Mr. Manager, is this available in Spanish and Russian also, or just English?
No, we don't have this chart in Spanish or Russian. We're looking at doing that. Recently, we have brought in a service so that we can do quick interpretations, translations for us, and so we may in fact do that. We haven't had any requests for it yet, but I think that might be a good idea to preemptively just look at doing it. Thank you for raising the question.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Move on to item 8, commission comments. I have a couple quick ones. Commissioners, in your packet, there's also some extra copies up towards the front. There's an article from Units Magazine, which is it's a nationwide landlords magazine, mostly for larger property owners, but I still get the copy, and it's called Answering the Demand for Attainable Apartments Without Subsidies. It's talking about builders who are building what we would call workforce housing, not low income and not really fully market rate, without any subsidies. It's an interesting article. Unfortunately, it does kind of point out the difficulty of doing properties like this in West Hollywood, because most of these properties are on larger pieces of land where they have a surface parking lot. They have a direct entrance to the unit from that parking lot. There's no elevators. So it's an interesting concept. I don't think it will really address anything that our council could pull off in West Hollywood, but I thought you might enjoy seeing that. Secondly, for the March 12th meeting, I am very excited. I'm going to be going to Equality California's one-day conference for appointed and elected LGBT officials, so I will be in Sacramento. Commissioner March will also not be available for that meeting. I want to make sure we're going to have a quorum for the March 12th meeting. So can we go down the line for the March 12th, if you'll be available to meet?
I should be here, but I will be coming right after a flight, so if the flight's delayed, then I wouldn't be, but I should be able to make it.
Are you available on the 12th?
I'll be here on the 12th.
I am also going to the conference on Friday. I was going to try to leave after this meeting. I'm not sure how late this meeting will go, but I will have to leave at a certain time. So if there's a chance that she might be gone, and I would like to get out of here early, or I'll have to run out of here early. I mean, maybe we should consider not having a quorum.
If we don't think we're going to have a quorum due to possibly flying,
I will be present.
1, 2, that would only be 3 commissioners who've committed that they will be here. So that would not be a quorum, correct? So for lack of quorum, I think we canceled the March 12th meeting. There were no appeals scheduled for that night. Some good topics, but we can put those off until maybe one of the meetings at Fiesta Hall. Would that be a possibility?
Yeah, we'll move the items to one of the meetings at Fiesta Hall.
Okay, so we're going to cancel the March 12th meeting for lack of quorum. And with that, we will go to item 9, our appeal, D-4249CD, 1425 North Crescent Heights Boulevard, unit number 108. The appeal was filed by the tenant, Jeff Berger. Mr. Berger, are you present? And the property owner is Roca Properties. Is there a representative from Roca Properties? Okay. So just to give you the lay of the land, excuse me, our staff attorney will make a presentation report to the commission. The commission will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff at that point. Once you're finished with that, Mr. Berger, since you filed the appeal, you will begin your discussions first. You have a total of 5 minutes. You can split your time between initial comments, and if you want to reserve some time for rebuttal, you may do so. We will ask questions of you, and then the representative from Roca Properties, you'll have 5 minutes, no rebuttal time. And with that, Ms. Regan.
Thank you. This case involves a decision by the hearing examiner to restore the rent regarding laundry facilities. On this issue, the hearing examiner ordered a partial restoration of the rent from $156 reduction to a $104 reduction. Tenant Jeff Berger has appealed this partial restoration of the rent. Staff recommends that the commission reverse the hearing examiner's decision on this issue. It's undisputed that the landlord has not restored any laundry facilities to the tenant who are currently taking the rent reduction. In decision D-4249, the hearing examiner ordered the landlord to provide laundry facilities to those tenants. This rent reduction applied to units 108, 202, and 208, the only units that were occupied at the time of the hearing. Given that there has been no compliance with the hearing examiner's order for the units 108 and 208, the only tenants to whom the rent reduction currently applies, there is no basis under the RSO on which to restore the rent. Thank you.
Questions from Ms. Regan?
I just have one question. Are we provided, and I apologize if you did provide it to us and I just didn't get it or print it off, but were we provided with the hearing examiner's decision on the rental or the compliance?
The underlying decision?
No, I have that. I'm just curious if we
Oh, the
get,
compliance decision? Yeah, it should be in the, it's supposed to be in the packet.
is it a one-pager? Could someone point that out to me? just that form in the beginning.
What page is that? Look at page 22. That's just the request, though. It's not the actual determination. I don't think we have that in our packet.
Yeah, I think all we have is the compliance determination request.
Do not. No. Do we want to take a couple of minutes to pass this down the line? Commissioners want to review this? Yep.
If you want to, I don't want to hold anything up.
Thank you.
We want to proceed with the tenants discussion while we're waiting for that copy? Sure. Okay. Yes. So, Mr. Berger, if you want to approach the podium, just for, excuse me. Oh, can wait for our staff attorney. I did forget to mention that we are an appellate body. We only review what's in the record, so we can't hear any new evidence. If it's not within our file, one of us will try and cut you off for no new evidence. So hang on just 1 minute, please.
May I ask a question?
No.
No.
I'm going to wait for our staff attorney to come back in the room. If you want to sit, you may. She's just making copies.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Are we back? All right, we'll begin. Please come to the podium. Just state your name, your city of residence, and how you'd like to divide your time between initial and rebuttal.
Jeff Berger, West Hollywood. I'd like to divide half for rebuttal, and it was just dependent on whether you had heard what this lady told you already, so it looks like I'll divide.
So 2.5 and 2.5?
Yeah,
Okay.
if I need that. Because really I was going to just read from, I want to say the notice of compliance of determination hearing that was originally submitted by the company, the management company, did not address this issue. So it shouldn't have even been discussed in the hearing. So I say that disqualifies it from the beginning. It referenced referenced only bike storage and not this issue. So I don't think it should be even discussed as an issue, but that aside, from the determination, it says, let's see, that the application is deemed to be filed on behalf of the tenants except those who have opted not to participate in the applications, which tells me that it applies to everyone who was in the building, and it wasn't a proportional thing divided up among people. Every tenant is deemed to be a party of the application unless he or she opts out otherwise. They admitted they took the laundry services away. 3 washers and 3 dryers were eliminated, supporting a valuation and rent decrease of $156 for each occupied unit. And in order for the rent reduction to be restored, respondent is ordered to provide laundry facility facilities substantially comparable to laundry facilities that were eliminated. Take all acts and reasonably necessary to perform this maintenance for the $156, and none of that occurred. And I think that's all.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Berger, at this time? You can have a seat, sir. Then the representative from Roca Properties. You would come forward and state your name and city of residence, and you have a total of 5 minutes.
My name is Hannah Scheidler. I reside in Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles. We don't dispute that there's no laundry on site. Per the previous hearing, the property was renovated, and we installed washer and dryers in each renovated unit. We feel that the credit amount given to the 2 remaining residents, original residents, $52 per unit, is a fair and reasonable credit to them for the lack of washer and dryer in their unit.
Commissioners, any questions? Yes, Commissioner O'Keefe?
I see no record of an appeal on that issue when there was the original award. Is that correct? I didn't miss one. The award was not appealed. The original hearing examiner decision on the valuation was not appealed, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Questions? Ma'am, I'm sorry, I have one quick question. Ma'am, sorry, one quick question, just to clarify. Unit 202, is that a unit that turned over since the original determination?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so it's been renovated and with a washer and dryer?
Washer and dryer has
Okay.
been provided inside that unit.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Berger, for your rebuttal?
Yes, I would just repeat, as Ms. O'Keefe said, that it wasn't in the original request that it be given back. So I don't think it even applies. And secondly, it clearly states that this was applicable to all units, not 3 units or 5 units, or if 24 didn't have laundry service, but all units. So the full amount, I think, applies to if there was 1 unit. And I do all my laundry and use every laundry machine when I did it. So it's a tremendous pain. It's, that you go somewhere and you are there for hours, and it's very different in the building that way for us. So I think it's a great decrement of services. That's all.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Berger? Thank you, sir. Do we want to take a few minutes so that we can review the compliance determination, then we'll start our discussions? Commissioners, can we proceed? Okay, then begin with commission discussion. Who would like to start? Commissioner O'Keefe?
I would agree with staff's recommendation and reverse the hearing examiner's decision. There has not been any replacement of any of the 3 washers or the 3 dryers. The fact that there is one more unit that's now been renovated does not change the fact that the 2 remaining units no longer have 3 washers and dryers. The original decision had a valuation on each and individual washer and dryer. If there was some dispute about that valuation, the way to take care of that would have been to appeal that decision. It was never appealed, so the issue before us is if it has been restored, and there are still 0 washers and dryers instead of 3. So I would overturn the hearing examiner's recommendation.
I think you said it very well, that this should have been, if that were the question, if the landlord felt that the dollar amount provided for assessed, which the hearing examiner clearly described how he came to that conclusion in the dollar amount. But if that was in question, if that they didn't agree with that dollar amount, it should have that decision should have been appealed. In this case, it wasn't, and the hearing examiner, the logic they're using doesn't make any sense to me compared to what he originally applied. So I would also agree with staff's recommendation to overturn the hearing examiner's decision on compliance.
Commissioner Maggio?
I would agree also to overturn. I mean, there were services here that were provided for these apartment units for many years, and now they're gone, and there's been no replacement. And that isn't how I think it works here. So I'm going to agree to overturn the hearing examiner's decision on this particular case.
Commissioner Charity?
Yes, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think this is one of those rare cases where the hearing examiner's decision is clearly in error, and we're right to reverse it.
Vice Chair?
Just very quick, I agree with staff's recommendation, and yeah, it makes no sense, the examiner's decision. There is no restoration of the service. The tenant's unit suffered the rent, housing service reduction, and clearly we should overturn the decision.
I'm going to agree with staff's recommendation. The decision wasn't for the removal of 1 washer and 1 dryer for each of those 3 units. It was for the removal of 3 washers and 3 dryers from the building. And as Mr. Berger said, there's times when you have to do multiple loads of laundry, so even if there was 1 washing machine replaced, that wouldn't be the same. It would not be a like-for-like replacement of services. The decision was for the removal of 3 washers and 3 dryers for the building, not just for those 3 apartments. I don't even know, and it's not really a topic for tonight's discussion, whether there'd be any restoration if the landlord to install washers and dryers, those 2 units. I don't know if that would even satisfy a restoration of service, but for the time being, I'd be voting in favor of upholding staff's recommendations. With that,
You can make a motion.
we want to make a motion?
You can make a motion.
Sure.
I make a motion to adopt resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission reversing the hearing examiner's decision on application D-4249 CD pertaining to the property at 1425 North Crescent Heights Boulevard, unit number 108.
Is there a second?
And I'll second that motion.
Okay. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirkpatrick?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Marks is absent. Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchian?
Aye.
Chair Bergstein?
Aye. Motion passes. If either party has any questions, be free to approach staff at the end of the meeting. And with that, we'll go on to item 10, new business. Proposal to implement a tenant right to counsel initiative to provide legal representation to tenants facing eviction. And this is a review and provide input. Mr. Noonan?
This is me, actually.
Ms. Regan's going to do the report. Thank you.
So last year, the City Council directed staff to come back with a proposal about the feasibility and the cost and the framework of a potential right to counsel initiative. And when we say right to counsel, what we mean is being able to provide every tenant who is subjected to an eviction proceeding with legal representation. Statistics show that 90% of landlords who initiate an eviction proceeding are represented by counsel, while 10% or less of tenants are represented. And when both parties have attorneys, the outcomes change drastically, and it also, over time, there's a significant reduction in the filings of eviction proceedings in the first place. And so this is this is a homelessness prevention measure. This is a way to maintain our affordable housing stock. This is a way to ensure some housing stability for tenants who might be on the bubble. And so what you see in front of you is a proposed framework. And what I'd love from you is to get your comments and your feedback, and if there's a consensus among the group about some of, if you want to go with one of the other of the recommendations, that would be helpful for council to know as well. Thank you.
We do have one public speaker, but do we have any questions for Ms. Regan at this point?
I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
And if you don't know the answer, that's totally fine. I don't need to know the dollar amount, but the city of West Hollywood, for the legal services that were provided as examples of what we currently do, for example, with Bet Zedek, that's a contract that the city pays for them to provide this service to our residents, right?
That's right. And actually, Cynthia might have that figure. I don't have the dollar figure of what we spend on that, but you can tell from the number of clients that are represented, and they don't provide full scope legal representation to all of the people that they help.
And is that the same for Alliance for Housing and Healing and for the two loan grantors to, I don't remember their names. But
Yes, they don't provide legal representation at all, right?
They don't provide representation, but I'm just curious, do we contract with them to provide those, or are those services they provide to others?
It's a contract, and with those other organizations, that's just a piece of the services they provide.
Thank you.
Commissioner Charity?
For the initial intake, I was just a little confused in the document whether it was going to be something affiliated with the city government, and then at another point it talked about an outside organization maybe doing it, and I was just wondering if you could clarify there.
Yes, so the intention is to contract with a number of legal services providers, and then have one of those providers be the point of contact for the intake and referral.
Another quick one, for the area median income discussion, was that going to be the Los Angeles area median income or the West Hollywood AMI?
I think it's only Los Angeles. I think
So
the metric is Los Angeles.
So the proposal that's being tossed around is just using the Los Angeles number, not our city's number? Just
right.
Okay. That's it for me.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Thank you for bringing this proposal and creating it. It says something about rental assistance as well, and that ideally would be part of it, and I just was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that piece as well.
Sure. So we do have some current rental assistance for people who need it. I think this program would expand that, because what we've seen is a lot of people end up in eviction proceedings because of some incident in their life, so that they're short of funds for a short period of time. And so rental assistance would be to cover whatever that shortfall would be, so that would help prevent the eviction proceeding from being filed in the first place, and also to cover just that short period of time. So this is the rental assistance piece is a critical component of this proposal.
And it could be both someone who's being evicted, and you said to prevent the eviction in the first place, right? The idea would be generally just providing assistance.
Right.
Great. And then one other question, and I apologize if it was here and I missed it. I saw there were two different possible models, one which would be providing free services regardless of income, and the other would be based on income. How would it work for someone if it was fee-for-service for those with higher incomes in terms of, would they be, they'd have to come to an agreement on fees and agree to pay immediately before representation starts, or how would it work in practice?
I mean, that would be with the legal services provider. However, their method is, it's typically on a sliding scale depending on your income. So I would imagine there would be some sort of a structure where they maybe pay a percentage up front. I'm not sure. It would be up to the legal services provider.
Okay, thanks.
One question. Peter, this might be a question for you to answer. In our packet, it says that 40% of our rent-stabilized units are below market with long-term tenants. I know that Elizabeth Savage used to say that in the first 10 years post-Costa-Hawkins, we had a 60% turnover of our rent-stabilized units, but we had no way of tracking if that was one unit turning over multiple times or if it was 60% of our housing. So does our new software program that you've been working on for years now track how many long-term tenants, how many units that have not turned over, if that makes sense?
We did an analysis of that a couple of years ago and did find that once a unit turns over, the probability that that unit will turn over again is much greater than a unit that has held in a tenancy for a longer period of time. Our current software right now, I don't believe that we have that function built into it as just a keyed function. However, it's something that I can look at to see if we, in fact, can do that. I think that it'd be an interesting metric to look at.
Couldn't that almost determine if we had a way to pull out the data when a unit was last re-registered upon new tenancy? That might be a way of finding out which units have long-term tenants in them, possibly. Okay. With that, we do have one public speaker, Cynthia Chigola. Close? Thank you. And normally I'd say 3-minute time limit, but you are only speakers, so we'll extend extra time if you'd like. If you could just state your name and city of residence, please.
So my name is Cynthia Chagoya, and I'm a resident of Los Angeles. I come from Bedsedic Legal Services. I am the directing attorney of our Preventing and Ending Homelessness project, and one of my central tasks is to oversee, of course, the West Hollywood project. Our West Hollywood project is staffed by one staff attorney, Alla Chesnick, who just hit her 20-year anniversary in that position early this January. So we had quite the party at the office to celebrate that key milestone. In terms of the legal services being provided now in the city, the services are wide-ranging. That includes services on housing, and that may be negotiating with the landlord, advising counsel, know your rights information. We also provide full scope representation, and that is, of course, representation in eviction cases. We also provide various services related to supplemental security income, so SSI, which is an important source of income for many of our vulnerable clients. And we also provide services on IHSS, that's in-home support services, which of course is a vital resource for also, elderly clients and clients with disabilities who may need assistance in homes. Today I'm here to talk in support of the city's draft proposal for a right to counsel in West Hollywood. I will say that, of course, as you may know, there is momentum across the country. This has been identified as a key critical response to combat housing instability, to combat homelessness, and to preserve affordability. Cities which have already adopted similar programs and ordinances are, of course, San Francisco, New York, and Philadelphia. Here in LA County, there is also momentum locally for such programs. I can tell you that our office is a key partner in implementing the same type of program in LA City and also LA County. In terms of what's happening here on the ground in LA County, I believe the county currently is looking at a proposal to start a right to counsel project in phases. Of course, you can imagine this is a large endeavor. As was described, it contains several critical pieces. That is an ordinance guaranteeing the right to an attorney in housing cases. That includes rental assistance. That includes education and outreach. So it's quite the heavy lift. So it's my understanding what LA County is considering is implementing
That's
such
time.
a program in phases.
Extend time. Unless my commissioners object, quick motion to extend time. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
So what LA County is considering now is implementing such a program in phases, and the areas that they have targeted for the first 2 phases, which would take place over an 18-month period, are zip codes out of the Norwalk Courthouse, zip codes out of the downtown Stanley Moss Courthouse, zip codes out of the Van Nuys Courthouse, and zip codes out of the Antelope Valley Courthouse. Of course, as you may know, eviction cases filed against West Hollywood residents are heard out of the Santa Monica Courthouse. So as that program is predicted to take shape in the next 18 months here locally, those services would not touch or reach WeHo residents. Those would be outside of this jurisdiction. Beyond that, I'm unaware of any plans or how that program would be implemented beyond the first 18 months. But we are here in support of such a program in West Hollywood. I know I don't have to recite the facts because I'm sure you all hear compelling stories from long-term tenants on a pretty regular basis who you need early interventions, that is early conflict resolution with their landlords, representation in eviction proceedings, and without those vital services are at risk of losing their long-term housing and at risk of homelessness. Some of the cases that touch me the most in this instance are the advanced age population. Those are elderly folks whose rents are significantly below market. They're typically at fixed income households. And when they come to us with a housing issue, I'm always concerned that there's not a real appreciation for how close to homelessness they are. Because we know that if they lose their housing, and let's say they're paying $700, $1,200 a month in rent, there's literally nowhere else in the county they can go at those rates. And what they'll be looking at that rate is what we call shared housing. That's multiple individuals in a household, typically not related, but really there because some circumstance has put them out of their existing households. So I will tell you probably not a secret, but this is a program I'm really, really passionate about. And we are so pleased to be involved and be able to give any input or guidance. I hope that we can continue to be a resource and work together and share, what we know on the ground and what we're learning about, how the right to counsel is playing out in other jurisdictions, and really be a partner and an ally in this work. So, thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Mr. Charity?
Could you give us, thanks for being here and speaking. I just had a quick question about who's being helped now in these eviction processes, and could you give us a feeling of who's falling through the cracks that a program like this would help support?
So I believe the case number cited in the proposal, I want to say that last year we had about 100 housing cases out of West Hollywood. I think that number includes both, brief service, advice and counsel, negotiating with the landlord, letter writing, phone calls, and then also, of course, the full scope representation. Just to give you some more background on unlawful detainers. So unlawful detainer eviction cases are what we call summary proceedings. They are unique. they are different than other court cases in that they have an expedited time frame. From start to finish, unlawful detainer cases are designed by state law to take place within a month. Once a tenancy notice expires, so let's say that 3-day notice to pay rent or quit expires, or the notice to perform in 3 days or quit expires, then the tenant may be served with unlawful detainer court papers. They have 5 days to file an answer. If they do nothing, they run the risk of default, and that expedites a move towards eviction really quickly. Now, because unlawful detainer cases are summary proceedings, they are often very high resource-intensive cases up front, especially when the client is one of our advanced age or otherwise vulnerable clients. They often require various accommodations, home visits. In some instances, we've had to get a typist because the client was hard of hearing and couldn't follow, the verbal communications. But having said that, at times we do reach capacity. That's just the honest truth. I have to be honest. We do reach capacity where if someone was to come to us, a few days before their court appearance, if we have, let's say Allah has an administrative hearing on an SSI case already scheduled, at this point in time, I cannot say that we have capacity to always accommodate those needs and to be able to devote the due diligence that the case requires. So at that point, then we have to prioritize cases, triage cases, and take on what we're able to handle, in that time frame. Now, we also we have a project under the County Services Measure H, which has provided for a little bit more increased flexibility, and we've been leveraging those resources. But the bottom line is the demand for housing attorneys, eviction defense attorneys is at more than the capacity that we're able to provide for. I will just say that there is some state money that's come on the table available for the services, and we're looking for ways to utilize that and have it, apply to all of our projects. One of the state funds cited in the proposal is the Shriver Project. What you should know about the Shriver Project is it's state money. It's been proven effective to provide, critical services to tenants. But in LA County, all of the Shriver resources are out of the downtown Stanley Moss Courthouse. So again, West Hollywood residents are not able to receive the benefit of that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner O'Keefe?
Following up on the question that Commissioner Charity asked, as part of the proposal, it would have a requirement that owners send a notice of termination to the city, and then I think the city would hook the individual up with the services. Right now, are there some people who who could use the services but never get legal assistance? Is there not a means by which they're getting connected with you at times?
Of course, there's always individuals that reach out to legal services too late. We have clients who come to us post-judgment after their case has already been decided and an eviction has been issued against them. What is so unique about the proposals floating around in LA County and including West Hollywood is it's really an aim for early interventions. So in New York, the right to counsel is triggered at the court case stage. What we're making a push for is triggering those interventions earlier at the notice stage. So at that point, if someone has a 3-day notice of some sort, they then have a right to seek counsel, get counsel involved, and have an early intervention to resolve the issue so that it doesn't escalate to a court case. And that's where rental assistance becomes critical because we do see a consistent flow of clients that have some interruption of income. And if there is rental assistance available, that would resolve the issue altogether. And that's a cost-saving mechanism because you're preserving affordable housing, and often for our clients whose rents are below market rate, it's cheaper just to pay their rent for the month than to pay a 30-day stay in a hotel. So it's really a cost-saving mechanism as well. So.
Different question as well. For eligibility, it says, must be a West Hollywood resident and must seek services as soon as possible, but no later than 1 day prior to the first scheduled court appearance in the eviction action. It doesn't mention business day, it just says day. Is that feasible for you, or would you need it to be a little bit more time to actually be able to have someone from staff appear?
I think to be more precise, we would say business day. That line is with the assumption that the program would be fully staffed. So assuming that it's fully staffed, yes, and that's really a push to be ultra inclusive and not turn tenants away. The benefit, the way I see that playing out is these cases would all be concentrated at the Santa Monica Courthouse. Already our office is at the Santa Monica Courthouse on a weekly basis. Santa Monica cases are heard, eviction cases are heard on Monday and Wednesday, twice a week. So there would be some kind of flow mechanism because there would be 2 days a week when cases would be heard. So really it could only be Tuesday where someone could come the immediate day before. For a Monday appearance, they would have to be in on Friday. And then Monday morning court is at 8:30 in the morning. So it's pretty early to try to get in contact with an attorney on that same day. But, you know, it's creative, but we feel like, you know, we have to try something new. There has to be some kind of new tools, and as what was described earlier, this is a shift in culture. This is shocking to some because business as usual is the landlord is represented, one side is represented, and one side is not. So it will be a cultural shift, but I think that's what's needed. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And do you have any suggestions to the proposal at all? Is there anything that you wish was in it that another city's doing, or anything you particularly think you've already noticed a few that are particularly helpful?
The only piece I would highlight, and I believe I gave this in comments earlier, is just to make clear that education and outreach has to be central. And I think with comprehensive education and outreach, we're going to then avoid those scenarios where tenants are coming in the day before their court case or, you know, post-judgment after their case has already been decided. So the budget provided, and I understand that perhaps that budget line item sits elsewhere, but the current budget in the proposal does not include a line item for education and outreach. So I would just want to make sure that that's provided. So that would be the only change.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, couple of questions. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and you answered pretty much to all the questions that I had in mind. But a couple of things. I know Ally Chesnick personally. She's a wonderful attorney and a wonderful person. And since she's the only staff attorney, does she have specific hours or days per week that the tenants can visit her, or she's available Monday through Friday? How does it work,
right.
The scheduling?
So Alla's schedule includes every Wednesday afternoon she provides intake at Plummer Park. Most of the other days she's at the office taking calls and responding to clients. Because there is a number of high needs clients, when she's not at Plummer Park and she's not at the office, she's often making home visits here in West Hollywood to accommodate those clients who perhaps cannot get to Plummer Park and cannot get into our office. And we also have a dedicated phone line for West Hollywood residents to make sure that they have immediate access to our services. But as of now, she's in West Hollywood one afternoon. I will tell you that we're looking to increase those hours. The other vital service in the city is a service provided by the Coalition for Economic Survival, which I believe is also described in their proposal, CES. They provide some intake on, I believe, Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings. I actually have a call with them tomorrow afternoon to talk about ways that we can partner more effectively. We've partnered in the past, and we're looking to restart that effort. But hopefully we'll have more time in West Hollywood soon.
And the other question, clearly, the way that you described, there's a certain number of cases that, one attorney can handle. That's understandable. So those tenants, they've been denied service because they came in late, or it's too late to do something. What Bedzedek would recommend? How does it work? Is that tenant provided some sort of a referral, or what you typically do?
I will say that at a minimum, all tenants are given, all individuals who contact us are given advice and counsel. So they are given some legal explanation of their rights. If we decline to provide full scope services, we typically will provide a referral to another legal service provider. To be frank, there are few legal service providers now that provide eviction defense services out of the Santa Monica Courthouse. We are one of them. So we're a little bit in a resource desert, so to speak, in this part of the county. For example, at the downtown courthouse, there are at least 10 offices, I think, that provide services out of that courthouse. And it's my opinion that that's where most services are concentrated. But we will provide referrals, and we always aim at a minimum to provide know your rights information, advice, and counsel.
And the services that Bedzedek provides, you don't charge anything. There are no membership fee or anything like that.
Absolutely. We are a free legal service provider across the board. I will tell you that in order to appear in an eviction case, you have to you have to pay a court filing fee. Most of our clients qualify for a fee waiver, so that $230 fee waiver, the $230 fee is removed. It's free. So, but right, it would be free service. In the event that the client doesn't qualify for a fee waiver, then it's their responsibility to pay for the court filing fee. In our suggestions for the proposal, we did propose a litigation budget to cover those rare instances when a client doesn't qualify for a fee waiver, just because if they have an attorney available, we want to make sure that they can actually go into court.
Thank you. And I think Bedzedek translates as House of Justice,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's truly what it is. It's, you guys provide wonderful services to the communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll dovetail on that. I am, by training, a litigation paralegal, and for 10 years I ran a pro bono clinic, initially funded through the Gay and Lesbian Center and then through HALSA. And what I could do was basically estate planning for people living with HIV, very limited scope. I can't tell you how many people I referred to Bedzedek, and even if you couldn't help them, your organization said, we can't help you, but they can. Harriet Buha or some other place. So your organization has a history of just really extraordinary work in Los Angeles County. I want to thank you for your dedication and service. I did kind of get lost in a sentence earlier in your notes. You were talking about the various courthouses, Antelope Valley, Newark, but I forgot what you were referencing. Did take place at the courthouse, but did not take place at Santa Monica Courthouse.
Right. And that is, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
I just got lost in my thoughts, sorry.
No problem. That is the current county's proposal for a right to counsel program in LA County. So LA County is considering a right to counsel program, and what they anticipate is that it will be a program that's implemented in various phases over a period of time. And now what is planned is an 18-month first phase-in period, and that's going to only cover, I would say, fewer than 10 zip codes in those places that I described to you. Norwalk, Metro LA, Van Nuys, Antelope Valley. And my point in providing that information is, if LA County was to start a right to counsel program tomorrow, those services are not going to touch or benefit WeHo residents. And as the plan is put forth now, that would certainly be the case for the next 18 months. Those services would not touch this jurisdiction.
So all West Hollywood eviction cases are always held at Santa Monica Courthouse?
Correct.
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 To touch on one of the commissioners commented about, have to contact you a day before. In our packet goes, the consequences of not responding timely are swift default judgment. But my understanding, I'm not an attorney, I don't play one, is that even if there's a default judgment, that sometimes the courts will overturn that if the representation shows up. If that is correct, might there be instances where you would be able to step in post-default to try and assist a tenant?
Yes, so with the right to counsel proposal put forth, representation would only be guaranteed pre-judgment before there's a judgment entered. If the case is post-judgment and an eviction has already been entered against the client, then I would say we would have to consider that on a case-by-case basis. Counsel would not be guaranteed, but you are in fact right. If there is an eviction entered and the tenant is still in possession of their unit, there are a number of different motions that can be filed, and those motions typically have to be filed on I'm talking about within 36 hours of the client coming in. You have to move really, really fast. But there is a variety of motions you can put forward to preserve the tenancy, but that can only be the case if the tenant is still in the unit. Sometimes we'll get clients come to us, they say, I didn't file an answer, there is a sheriff's notice posted on my door, so I just moved out, and now I'm here, can you help me get back in my apartment? And unfortunately, because they vacated, because they moved out, the unlawful detainer judge no longer has jurisdiction to hear the case. So it's so important that if tenants are at that phase, they stay in the housing and consult an attorney as soon as possible. But yes, that would be relief that we would consider as well.
Thank you. Any further questions at this point? Thank you very much. I'm going to ask a question of staff, just because we had a bit of an issue at our last meeting. We had basically a receive and file and make comments on the potential for not losing your relocation fee, and the record wasn't as clear as we would have liked it. So how can we best do our comments tonight to reflect in the record, because we're not making a motion?
You can give your individual input as commissioners. You can also, if there's a consensus on a recommendation, you can vote as a unit on that if there is such a consensus. But you can also provide individual comments on the staff report that I can take a look at.
So I would suggest that we start our deliberations, and it appears that we are in consensus on one particular item. We can take a roll call vote to show that it was a consensus opinion, or if they're just individual opinions, that'll be reflected within the record. Does that make sense? Who would want to ask a question?
Just a question, one more. So having learned that, this was a really well-written and very informative staff report, and I think that all of these suggestions are amazing. Are you, as staff, bringing forward a specific recommendation, or would you recommend that we have a specific recommendation to council?
I think it would be helpful to the council if the commission has a recommendation to be able to communicate that to the council. At this point, we're going back to council with a variety of proposals so that then we can get direction from council for whatever program they end up approving, assuming they approve one.
Commissioner Kirby, since you have the microphone, would you like to begin the discussion?
I would just say that, first of all, how proud I am to live in a city that takes such good care of their tenants, even without this proposal. Bet Zedek has been providing services to the city for since I can remember, since I worked for the city, and I'm sometimes reminded now that I work for the State Assembly and we represent a much larger area than West Hollywood, people with housing concerns will often call our office, and my immediate response is, oh, Bet Zedek. But what I quickly learned is, Bet Zedek does so much in our community, and whether it's immigration or name changes and licenses for transgender individuals, all of that but only West Hollywood contracts with them to provide that extra service of, regarding housing law. And so it's a huge advantage that we already have, and I appreciate the city for providing the service and for Betzedic for their willingness to serve our serve our constituents. I read the book Eviction about 3 or 4 years ago by Mr. Desmond. I don't remember his first name, but Matthew Desmond. And if any of you have not read that book, I would definitely recommend reading it. It's really brings to light how evictions have changed. The administration of filing for evictions has really changed over the years, and has brought us to where we are today. When we see them, I think the staff report said 300 or 400 potential evictions in a year for just for West Hollywood residents alone, into the thousands in San Francisco. And it wasn't always like that. Evictions were not something that landlords even wanted to do and file, but things have clearly changed. Money has probably got a lot to do with that. And the statistics that in that book match with the statistics that they've told us today about the 90% eviction, or 90% of landlords filing for evictions are represented by council, and only 10% or less of tenants who are receiving evictions are represented. And the statistics for the success rate of the tenant is very, very, very low if they are not represented. So I am 100% behind a proposal for this city to take the next step in providing services to our tenants, leveling the playing field, and providing legal services in tenant evictions for all of our residents, regardless of their income. I don't mind if we did have a sliding fee scale, that can be worked out later, but I definitely think that the city should provide and fund, since we are one of the fortunate cities to actually have funding surpluses throughout the years, that we should use that money to protect our tenants and protect our housing stock. So that's the direction I would recommend that we tell council, and I think that about covers it.
Commissioner Maggio?
Well, I am definitely for the right to counsel initiative. We could never do enough for people who need these services and have these needs. And this just continues to show our support in a very emphatic way, and I'm very supportive of anything that could help tenants to not be pushed around, to be able to have legal counsel, and to be able to resolve issues in a fair and equitable way. So certainly I support this initiative.
Mr. Charity?
Well, of course, this all depends on how much money we have, and we have a lot of, new development coming up in West Hollywood right now, and if that's providing a lot of great tax revenue for the city, then I'm more inclined to support something that's, a free service without regard to income, if we have the money for it. If we are going to implement a sliding scale, my recommendation would be to find out what the AMI is for West Hollywood. I just wonder that if we're using Los Angeles's area median income, if we are excluding people in our city, if our area median income is higher, I think it just would be good information to know what the West Hollywood AMI is. Because if ours is higher, then 80% of the AMI here would include more people that could, be eligible for the free service without regard to their income. I'm in favor of what Commissioner O'Keefe touched on earlier, which is clarifying that to be one business day rather than just one day. That needs to be clear to people in the education that you need more time. Also, obviously, this monster topic of rental assistance is a real big one. You could go into the weeds on that one a lot. And I think that, the proposal as it sets it out in sections 1 and 2 is, really good to get started. If there's money left over for the rental assistance, that would be wonderful. If any commissioners have comments on that, we could mix it up. I think some type of rental assistance is great. Obviously, as it's proposed, it's, time limited. The examples given were loss of job, reduction or termination of benefits, and those sorts of things. I mean, obviously, we could get into the weeds so much on that one in terms of how long and what hardship qualifies and those sorts of things. So I'm kind of leaving that monster topic alone and providing more detailed detailed notes on what I think about the other earlier topics I spoke on.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Yeah, thank you again to Ms. Reagan for putting this fantastic proposal together. I, like others, I'm so proud that our city is doing so much for renters, and with the tragedy and crisis and homelessness, anything we can do to try to lessen that and not create new homeless people and new tragedies, I enthusiastically embrace. I agree with the suggestion to include some education funding, hopefully, as well, to make sure people are aware of the services. I'm happy to see the rental assistance. I'm concerned. I would love to see our city do more on that, because it's a lot cheaper to have a small subsidy so someone can afford their housing that otherwise would not be able to, than to have them end up being homeless and having all of those expenses and all of that trauma. So I'd love to see that. Given that we have limited funding, I would tend to prefer to have have a sliding fee scale, but I would think it would have to be very carefully crafted, and I don't know how feasible that is to judge who's really rent burdened, because we have such high housing costs that a person might not qualify as low income, but they might not have any disposable income, and we've got healthcare costs and student loan costs and all of these other things that add up to mean that a person even without a technical low income might need help. But at the same time, if we have someone who's very, very wealthy and can afford it, is it a better use of city resources to pay for legal assistance for them than for housing from somebody who might otherwise become homeless? I would tend to favor the latter, but I know it might not be very easy to come up with a formula that's fair and easy to enforce, but that would be my thinking on that piece. Similarly, I think it's really, really important to keep people housed who are elderly and have low rents, but also I think we can't forget the people that moved in the last 10 years or so, whose rents might not be as low, but still might be struggling and still might end up without housing if they can't have assistance. So I would hope that the assistance would be based on anyone who's rent burdened, regardless of how low or how high their rent is, because if they're paying below market, they still could end up homeless otherwise.
I can just respond to that. Yeah, representation would be guaranteed to anyone facing eviction. It would not depend on how much rent they pay.
Oh, I mean the assistance, the financial assistance piece.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the sliding scale is based on income.
Yes, I kind of jumped from one topic to the next.
Oh, gotcha.
So at first I was talking about free representation, and then I was talking about rental assistance, so sorry for the lack of clarity. For rental assistance, I would hope it would be based on need as well, and that there would be something available to people who in many cases are sharing homes with many other adults and are rent burdened. And I think that's it for my comments, but thank you again.
Mr. Vice Chair?
I'll be very brief. I like this proposal. Everything that is in it is very important. It's crucial to the city. And although the city does a lot now by providing the really incredible services to the tenants, and the protections for eviction protections that we have now, this going to definitely cover a lot more, and more people will have access to that full scope legal representation that ZEDEC cannot, handle. Obviously, a large number of tenants, recipients, and I think it says something about up to 400 people. I think that's a lot, and that's great. And maybe that's not going to be the maybe that number can increase with every year, and depending on what's going to be the contract, how much money the city is going to put into this. But this is a wonderful proposal. One thing I wanted to see if here the proposal says that there would be a legal. There would be the program would work with the local legal service organization as one agency that will serve as a lead organization, and that lead organization will facilitate intakes and refer cases to the appropriate provider. I wonder if the city will be able to participate in the process, so then we would know who would be that provider, and maybe there would be a list of the suggested organizations, nonprofits that the city may use. So then we kind of know who's gonna do this work for our tenants. Right, I'm fully supporting this. Thank you.
Sure.
Another question. Commissioner Topchian just brought up about the administration of the program or having that lead agency. Is there a reason, or was it just selected? My Siri is going off. Is there a reason why, or is there a prohibition from the city city employee playing the role of intake, or is that just not what's being proposed?
Right, that's, we're looking at the San Francisco model, which they have found a lot of success with. Since the legal services organization, that's what they do. They have the expertise in evaluating these cases. So they already have that infrastructure in place. So to get this up and running and on its feet and workable more quickly, just makes more sense to contract with a number of service providers and then have somebody be sort of the clearinghouse for that.
Go ahead.
I just had one quick comment. I'm assuming in that intake too, there's some type of dividing line between somebody that's renting maybe a luxury, apartment or a $10,000 home versus a rent stabilized tenant. I don't know if this covers just every renter, but I just would like to, look into that issue just a little bit, because we do have a lot of luxury rentals in West Hollywood, and I don't know if this service is meant to call it Betsadec for someone renting a really luxury property. Is that?
Well, so currently, currently Betsadec is available to anyone.
Okay.
But this model, that's one of the reasons one of the proposals is a sliding scale. So if someone does have an income to afford that, then their services wouldn't necessarily be free.
So I am absolutely in favor of this with a couple of thoughts, caveats. One, I want to reiterate some of my other commissioners have mentioned about education. First of all, the services that are available to our residents, prior to an eviction, both Betsadec, the Comprehensive Senior Center at Plummer Park, the Alliance for Housing and Healing. If you don't know what that is Ryan White HOPWA money, where if you're HIV positive, you can get a grant twice a year to help pay with your rent. National Council for Jewish Women and the Jewish Free Loan. I think if we could encourage council to provide funding for more education, more outreach, so our residents know these services are available before you are in crisis and facing eviction. I am in favor of it being on a sliding scale. I know with your thought about luxury housing, I kind of would just conjecture that anybody who's facing eviction for non-payment of rent for financial reasons probably is not renting a $14,000 apartment, and if they are, they probably have their own counsel. I'm just guessing. But I think that any services we provide ought to be on a sliding scale for those who are truly low income, meet those requirements, absolutely no costs, waive all fees. But if somebody is more like workforce housing, a moderate income, could contribute something to their legal process, I'd be in favor of that. And as I'll speak as the only landlord on the commission. I've been a landlord for 19 years, and I'm fortunate, touch wood, I've only had to do one eviction. Tenants with me for 11 years. First 9.5 years, they were quirky, but great tenants. And the last year and a half, they faced medical issues and employment issues. It was an unpleasant situation on both sides. I will say that the attorney that I employed, that when the process server came to serve them documents, went over it. And so they knew, this is the date for your hearing. This is when you must file a response. If you do not file a response, I don't know if all law firm process servers do that, but at least in this case, my tenants had no questions about what was going to proceed. At that point, to be honest, they were living elsewhere and were just kind of storing their things in my unit, but and the eviction went through fairly smoothly. I do want to talk about, I know that this is to prevent people from becoming homeless, but I still think that we ought to consider the right to counsel for what I call low-income landlords. Most of the property owners in West Hollywood we own one property. Mom and pop, mom and mom, pop and pop. And there are attorneys that know how to sort of game the system in a tenant's favor, and while an eviction or unlawful detainer should take 1 month, it can get strung out over 6 to 8 months. And if you're a small property owner dependent upon that income, all of a sudden you're facing 6 to 8 months of no income coming in while it's resolved in the court. I would like to have in the comments to council that I think that if there is a truly low-income property owner facing a situation, that we ought to consider some type of legal assistance for that property owner as well. I know the situations don't come up nearly as frequently as they do on the tenant side, but occasionally in cities like West Hollywood, where most of us are one-property owners, the effect of not receiving our rent for 6 to 8 months can be absolutely catastrophic to our own finances. I think that's it. I'm not sure, do we have any areas that we seem to have a consensus on that we want to take a vote on? Did you guys notice anything, or just include these?
Is there a consensus around a preference for the sliding scale as opposed to free legal representation, or did I?
Can we take a quick vote on that, if you'd be in favor of it being on a sliding scale?
I would.
Yes? Yeah. Mr. Vice Chair? I'll vote yes.
Aye.
We're talking about a sliding scale, right?
Yes, correct.
I would support a sliding scale, but
Yes.
Okay, consensus. Anything else that you noticed in our comments?
No, that's terrific. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Is it worth us saying generally that we support the proposal?
Is it-
Is it worth
And I will
having
say,
general
yes, that I did get. Thank you. That's important, yeah.
Good discussion. Thank you all. With that, we go to item 11, public comments. I don't have any public speaker slips at this point. Excuse me. Item 12, commission comments. Commissioners, any further comments for this evening?
I just wanted to mention that I was able to make it to the advanced landlords, property owners session this last week. I think it was this week. The dates fly by. I think it was Tuesday night. That was put on by the city for landlords to learn about the policies of the city and the rent stabilization ordinance and non-discrimination, all those issues. Is excellent. There were about 9 property owners in attendance. If it were just tenants, I would say that's a low amount, but I have no idea how many units those 9 property owners own in the city. So I was wondering if maybe in future tenant landlord sessions like that, if maybe that's part of the questionnaire on somewhere, so we can say later on we've reached out to 10 landlords that represent 300 units or whatever it might be, and it kind of gives us a better idea of how much we're covering throughout the city. Thanks. Excellent program, and the staff did amazing at answering and they always stay after and answer specific questions and do a great job.
Further comments, commissioners? Item 13, staff comments. Mr. Noonan, any further comments for this evening?
Well, I'll just add on to Commissioner Kirby's comments. I think that's a great idea. And in fact, we have a map of the city, and in our housing conversations, we invite participants at the meetings to put a dot where they live. Perhaps we'll even invite the property owners to put dots on properties that they manage, and we'll photograph that so that we can really kind of measure, who's coming to the trainings and who's learning the information and where those properties are in addition to the volume of units. Thanks for the suggestion.
Further comments? With that, we will adjourn to the next regular meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission, which will be held on March 26th at Fiesta Hall at Plummer Park. Is that correct? At 7 o'clock.